Greetings. This is Joe Green, head pastor of St. Paul's Missionary Baptist Church located in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, also the founder of the 2019 movement. And I want to share a couple of thoughts. You know, it's with a heavy heart, somewhat of a heavy heart that I do this stream. Um, as we talk a little bit about the death of Floyd in Minneapolis, most of you have probably heard of this by now. And, it's really sad. It's a sad state of affairs. And if you haven't seen the video footage, I would just caution you to watch it. It's really, caution you if you plan on watching it, I should say, because it's very, very disturbing. You know, you see this image of an African-American male on his stomach with his hands cuffed behind his back, and a white police officer just putting the full weight of his body on his neck. You know, his knee is in his neck, and you can hear George just asking to get up, saying he can't breathe. And it's very difficult to watch. It's very difficult to watch. And I think it's an important conversation. You know, whenever these things happen, I try not to rush to speak on it or make a video or anything like that. I try to spend some time in really getting all the facts and also, spending time in prayer to make sure that we're hearing things, because we have to be very careful in this day and age, especially when you look at mainstream media, when you look at the things that we see and how news is presented to us. It's important for us not to rush to judgment before we have all the facts. Similarly, we had this Ahmaud Arbery case that is still pending. There were arrests made already, but there's still a lot of facts and a lot of discussion for that as well. I think that it's important for us to allow the courts to kind of bring forth all the facts in that case. It wasn't as black and white as people try to make it, and that's no pun intended. It wasn't as clear cut as it originally was reported, at least from my perspective. When it was first reported, they talked about Ahmaud Arbery as though he was randomly jogging down the street and two white guys in a pickup truck just gunned him down. But case, and again, I'm not making any decision either way until all the facts are presented. Now, we'll say in this particular instance with George Floyd, and then I want to tie these together for the sake of the discussion. But I think that in the case of George Floyd, we have enough information to make certain conclusions, to draw certain conclusions. First and foremost is best case scenario. And when I say best, I don't mean this to belittle the death of George Floyd, just like I wouldn't belittle the death of Ahmaud Arbery or any other person for that matter, whether black or white, Hispanic, any race, any ethnicity, any person who loses their life. It's a tragedy anytime someone loses life. So I'm not belittling that by saying best case scenario. But the reason I'm using the term best case scenario is giving the officers the benefit of the doubt, which, in our legal system, it's supposed to be innocent until proven guilty, even though there's a lot of injustice historically in this country. But best case scenario is that this officer demonstrated horrible policing, right? He should be charged. He should spend some time in jail. Best case scenario. There's no way. I was in law enforcement at one point in my life. And there's no way that if I have a person, an unarmed person laying face down with their hand cuffed behind their back, does that person pose any threat to me? And the only time you're supposed to use deadly force or physical violence is in the case of impending danger to the officer or someone around. For instance, if a person had a gun or a knife, or they had the opportunity to cause great bodily harm to a person, and they pose that, you're allowed to use excessive force or deadly force in those situations. But in this case, it was quite obvious that George Floyd did not pose a present danger to the officer or anyone around him. He was on his stomach, handcuffed behind his back, and therefore the officer should not have used anywhere near the amount of force that he was using in the video. Now, regardless of what happened before or after, in that moment, when you see these things occurring, this officer is absolutely overriding his power, using his power. He's being a bully for the most part, which is why this case is so troubling, because these things happen have happened more than they should have happened. One time is too many, but they seem to have happened more than they, recently they've happened more. And my question to you, knowing the historical uh, background and relationship between African American males and law enforcement, my question to you is it happening more frequently, or is it just that there's more access to cameras and recording devices that we see these things happening more? Right? That's the first question we all have to ask. I'm not answering it either way, and I'm not trying to skew people's opinion anyway. Right? I want to have it open and honest and a conversation that's not based on emotions. And I'm going somewhere with this. I want you to understand that it's important for us not to just give into our emotions and have these knee-jerk reactions whenever we see these things occurring. We need to take time and process these things logically, which is why I say it's important, especially from my perspective. I don't want to jump to rush to judgment and do a video and make a commentary right off the bat. We need to spend some time and going beyond the emotional part of this and really start to look at things from a factual basis as we start to make our conclusions, right? So the first thing is this cop is absolutely using excessive force in the video that we see. And worst case scenario, or best case scenario, I should say, he should be charged. He should, they have lost their jobs, all 4 police officers involved. And I saw a video recently that the mayor of Minneapolis is calling for the prosecutors to bring charges against the arresting officer. That should happen. Based on the evidence, there's enough evidence that you can see in the video that should happen. There was no threat in that video to the officer's life. Now we do have to, without a doubt, acknowledge the fact that there's a disproportionate amount of African American males that die at the hands of police than other ethnicities, other races, right, in the country. There's a disproportionate amount based on statistics, and a recent Washington Post article talks about the fact that at least since 2017, 22% of all people that died at the hands of police officers were African Americans. 22%, even though African Americans only make up 13% of the population. 22% of people that died by police were African Americans. Right now, it's important for us to look at this from a factual, logical basis, based on evidence and not based on emotions, because it's very clear that the powers that be have an agenda that they're promoting. And why do I say that? The reason I say that is because even though 22% of people that were shot to death, I should say, I want to make sure that I preface that they were shot to death by police, 22% were African American males. Now, we know that George Floyd was not shot to death. He was, it seemed as though he choked or he strangled to death. He was suffocated, just like Eric Garner. Eric Garner didn't die because he was shot by police officers. Nevertheless, it was the interaction with police that caused his demise, right? But the reason I want to bring this up is because 22% of those who die at the hands of police officers who are shot to death are African American males. But yet there's a clear agenda that's being promoted, because only 22%, that means that 78% of people that are shot to death by police officers are not African American males, yet you only see images of African American males that die at the hands of police officers on the national news, right? I have not seen personally, and if I'm wrong, I stand corrected, but I have not seen any images of non-African American males. I haven't seen any white males that were killed or shot to death by police officers or any other way. I haven't seen it. So if it's out there, I haven't seen it, but I do know without a shadow of a doubt that overwhelmingly when they show you a person that's shot to death by a police officer, in this case, possibly strangled or suffocated by a police officer, it's an African American male. If a news outlet is simply reporting the news and not promoting an agenda, they should give you a reasonable and realistic depiction of the interactions, the negative interactions between police officers and people, right? So if 78% of the people that die by the hands of police officers, that are shot by police officers, are non-African Americans, why is it that we only see images of African American males being shot by police? I would submit to you that there's an agenda. There is a stirring up. Of course, we know that when it comes to media, that bad stuff sells, right? Bad stuff gets people's attention more than good stuff, right? And so I know that's part of it. They're trying to get ratings. They're trying to scoop somebody else. They want to be the ones who break the story. That's why you have so much breaking news in the news. They want to beat everyone else to the punch. But I want to say to you that true journalism would dictate that they show a reasonable percentage of those who are not African Americans dying by police if they are simply trying to report the news. If they want to give you a realistic view of what is happening, they should have a more accurate depiction of these negative interactions, but they only show you African American males. So we have to be careful, because what happens is when it gives you the impression that only African American males are the only ones that die at the hands of police officers, right? We have to be very careful of that. We have to be careful of not to allow our emotions to skew us and to take us off, because what happens? Take us off track, because what happens? So now you have this high level of fear in the African American community. We have this distrust of police in African American communities. You have this false sense of just this overwhelming depiction of white officers that are just looking to kill black people. And I've even heard LeBron James, one of NBA star LeBron James, saying we are literally being hunted down every time we leave the house. Now, when you promote that type of idea, it really sends a false message that can be very detrimental to not only African Americans, but to the community as a whole. Because if you have this heightened sense of tension already, and again, it should be based on an accurate depiction, you have this heightened sense of tension, of stress and fear, it only leads to bad things. It only leads to bad things. And so we have to be very careful. We also have to be very careful that the news is constantly putting celebrities in front of us as the ones who are kind of giving us an opinion. They're opinion shapers. We have to be careful. That's not by chance. That's not a coincidence. That is intentional, because are being pushed. So when they have celebrities that always get in front of the camera that give you their opinion, then it puts our trust in them, and it really stokes our emotions. So when people like LeBron James or any other celebrity, obviously, when they are put in a place of opinion shapers, then it makes people gravitate towards their opinion, even in lieu of facts or logic. Right. So we have to be careful about that. And that's not a new thing. That's an age-old thing. If you've been watching my channel, the 2019 movement, I go through a very accurate historical depiction of the events that have occurred in America and throughout. And so that's why it's so important for us to look at it through a logical lens and not just be given over to emotions. We have to realize also that, and this is not a popular opinion, but you have to look at the cities where these things occur. And there's a reason why I'm saying that. You have to look at the cities. You have to look at the systems that are set up in these cities, and why there's such a, it seems like there's so much violence. There's so much negative police interaction in these particular communities. So you have to realize that they're weakened communities in this. And I'm not trying to make this a political thing, but when you understand certain agendas and how they weaken the community, it increases the opportunity for negative police interaction. It increases the level of criminality. It increases the level of hopelessness in the community. And when you have hopelessness and disenfranchisement in the community, you have a heightened level of criminality. You have a heightened level of negative police interaction. You have a heightened level of distrust in the community between the police and the citizens, especially as it regards to minorities. So we have to be very, very careful. When we look at these major cities like Minneapolis, when we look at major cities like Philadelphia, Baltimore, Chicago, Detroit, St. Louis, these cities have things in common. They have a very they have been controlled by a liberal agenda for a long time. And I know a lot of people say, oh, there you go with that liberal agenda thing. But when you look at these communities, you see weakened family structures. You have weakened economic structures. You have weakened educational structures. And those things historically increase violence, drug use, criminality, et cetera, et cetera. And so as a pastor, especially, and as a historian, I want us to understand how you put things back in a community. How do you put a community back together? When I grew up, there was a lot more self-policing than there is now. And I need you to know that statistically, that in 2020, an African-American male has a greater probability of being incarcerated than even in the 1960s. I'm going to say that again. In 2020, there's a greater probability of an African-American male being incarcerated than there was in the 1960s. So statistically speaking, in the 1960s, African-American males had a 1 in 6 chance of being incarcerated, where in 2020, an African-American male has a 1 in 5 chance of being incarcerated. Now, we have to look at this and to look at why that is, because I would submit to you that there's not more overt racism in 2020 than there was in the 1960s. Most of you who know history, in the 1960s, there was a huge amount of overt racism that has been combated. I'm not saying it's completely destroyed, but over the last 50 plus years, there's been a lot of things that have happened to lessen the overt racism in America. So we have to be very careful in looking at things from a more logical, factual basis and not allow our emotions to have us do a knee-jerk reaction. We have to be careful because when we don't, we end up doing more damage than good. We don't ever come up with solutions, because when we do things based on emotions, then many times we're not coming up with realistic solutions. So what do I mean? I mean that when we see things like this George Floyd case, when we see the negative interaction between African-American communities and police, then we have to start to look at things from a practical, factual basis that allows us to really come with real solutions, right? Real solutions that aren't based on emotions, not based on knee-jerk reactions, not, even protesters. I believe it's important for people to protest peacefully. That's our First Amendment right. So when these things happen, I applaud those who go to the streets to peacefully protest this incident, whether it's George Floyd or any other interaction between police officers and African Americans, where it turns out in the death of the person, right? It's important because it shines light on these things. It allows us to have an open and honest dialogue that brings us to some realistic solutions. And, from a historical standpoint, and as a pastor, I will say the number one thing that causes all this, these things that I mentioned, is a breakdown of a community, breakdown of a family, lack of small business owners, right? One of the things that they really have been pushing in some of these cities, especially the Democrats, is they push higher minimum wages. And I need you to understand that higher minimum wages is not the answer. Higher minimum wages is not the answer. What is the answer is being able to create a community and economy where you have more small business owners. Because if I'm a small business owner and I'm able to prosper and also provide jobs and opportunities to other people in my community, I don't have to worry about the minimum wage, because I won't be I won't be confined to $15 an hour. $15 an hour is not enough to raise a family and feel comfortable. It's just not. So raising the minimum wage, is not the answer. The answer is building stronger communities, building stronger families that helps to self-police. And again, see, when I was growing up, we didn't have as much police interaction in our neighborhoods because our community policed itself. So when I was out as a young man or a child doing something I wasn't supposed to, other people in the community would say something. We had a lot more fathers and men in our community that would say, young man, what are you doing? Come here, get off that corner, go home. Or they would call my parents, and I was afraid for them to call my parents and tell them I was doing something wrong, because of the fact that I would be disciplined then. I'd be disciplined where I was at before, then I was disciplined at home. So stronger communities help to police itself, and it lessens the negative interaction between the people in the community and police officers. There's less of an opportunity for these negative interactions. When you have stronger communities and stronger families and stronger businesses, you actually have less criminality because of the fact that there's more opportunities. A high level of criminality comes when you don't have opportunities, you don't have jobs, when you have to be confined to minimum wage, because a lot of young, energetic men are not going to allow themselves just to go by minimum wage. They're going to make something else happen because they want to do something greater than what minimum wage dictates. So I just wanted to chime in on that. And I just, again, I want us to, whether it's George Floyd, rest in peace, our prayers go out to his family and his friends and his community, all these other people that have these terrible things happening to them and their families. As an African-American male myself, and having a son who's a young African-American male, I think it's critical that we have these conversations and dialogue so that we don't keep repeating the cycle, but we have to have these conversations in a logical, less emotional, knee-jerk reaction, and do it in a way that allows us to come with some real solutions and to break the cycle and to build up our communities to what it really should be. This has been Joe Green, head pastor of St. Paul's Missionary Baptist Church, located in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, also the founder of the 2019 movement. Peace and blessings to you. Until next time, please subscribe to the channel. Please share the videos so we can do more live streams and have more great conversations. Be blessed.